This video explains what Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government's motives are behind the current coal shortage in India and his National Monetization Pipeline scam to privatize public sector businesses. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. In conducting research into the Narendra Modi government's National Monetization Pipeline scheme, revealed on August 23, 2021, which is a scheme to privatize public sector business enterprises, and into the current coal shortages in India, which is seriously affecting the electric power sector in India, which will slow down India's economic recovery. I read articles and videos by commentators and went through media interviews of prominent economists and a former Government of India minister. On the NMP plan, which is the National Monetization Pipeline plan, I went through media interviews by Kaushik Basu, who is a professor of economics at Cornell University. He was a chief economist at the World Bank and former chief economic advisor with NDTV on August 27, 2021, and an interview by P. Chidambaram, former finance minister of India and current member of parliament, his interview with The Wire on August 30, 2021. Besides reading articles on the coal shortage in the coal industry in India, I viewed a video by Ghanshyam Kaushik dated October 10, 2021 titled Scam or Conspiracy? Reason Behind the Coal Shortage and Power Crisis in India. Know the Reality, which I believe has authentic information. Before I provide my analysis and views on the two issues, let me state that I found Chidambaram's comments on the Modi government's motives very telling. I am paraphrasing here, but this is what he said. The motive of the government has been suspect from the very beginning, that they started cherry picking airports, seaports, power plants and giving them away. That is the key to understanding all the actions of India's Modi government. Its motives are suspect. All actions of the Modi government are mala fide. The purpose of the Modi government ever since he took office on May 26, 2014 has been to corner all the financial and economic assets of the country and put them under the control of cronies from his home state of Gujarat, namely the Ambanis and Adani, the richest men in India, and his allies in India through the good offices of Germany. This German orchestrated alliance includes the Indian states of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Bengal, the South Indian states of Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, and Telangana, and the Banias scattered all over India, but primarily in the North Indian states, and the states now controlled by the Rajputs and Marwadis of Rajasthan, which include the states of Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and Madhya Pradesh, as well as the Parsis, which includes the great Tata industrial and business empire. Here are some statistics that will explain the true motives. India's statistics are not very reliable and relevant ones are hard to come by. But here are some rough but important employment statistics that will illustrate the problem with Modi's schemes. Total employed people in India number about 500 million. About 3.8 to 4% of people in India are employed in the government sector, which includes public sector undertakings or PSUs or government-owned business enterprises. In comparison, only about 3.5% of people are employed in the private organized sector. The organized sector means big private corporations and small corporations. However, most of the corporations are very small. Therefore, private organized sector is in the bigger and profitable enterprises is even smaller. The public sector undertakings directly employ about 1.4 million people in India. Indian Railways directly employ about 1.4 million people. The Modi government wants to privatize the PSUs, which is the public sector undertakings, and much of the railways. PSUs generate additional employment in two ways. First, to produce their products or services, they need to buy products and services from suppliers. Therefore, they generate employment in enterprises that supply those products and services. This is called the output multiplier. I have not been able to find reliable data that indicates the employment effects in aggregate of increase in output for the overall economy in India. I've used two studies to assume rough estimates of the output multiplier effects. The first study is quantifying the income and employment multipliers for Mumbai region by Sanjeev Pohit from the National Council of Applied Economic Research, New Delhi, India. And the second one is industry specific multipliers to identify key industries of Indian economy, an application of input output analysis by Priyanka Tarial of Kurukshetra University. Therefore, I will use illustrative figures taken from these two studies. The input output multiplier may be of the order of 3 to 4 times, say an average of 3.5 times, for the products and services provided by the PSUs. Therefore, the 2.8 million people employed in the PSUs and the railways will generate additional employment of about 9.8 to 11.2 million in the economy. The 2.8 million employees of PSUs and the railways then would generate further employment as they spend or save their incomes. This effect is known as the employment multiplier. This employment multiplier may be of the order of 1, meaning that 2.8 million employees via the employment multiplier effect would generate an additional 2.8 million jobs. Thus, the 2.8 million people employed in the PSUs and the railways generate an additional 12.6 to 14 million jobs approximately. At present, people from the North Indian states that are not part of the Indian states allied with the Germans have a fair shot of obtaining employment among the 2.8 million people employed in the PSUs and the railways. However, once the PSUs and the railways are effectively privatized through the NMP scheme, actually the PSUs supposedly will be leased to the private sector for 25 to 30 years. In reality, they will end up in the hands of Ambani, Adani, Tatas, Marwadis, or South Indians, and employment in them will be controlled by them. Once these enterprises are controlled by them, North Indians will be slowly eased out and virtually all the jobs given to Gujaratis, Rajputs, Bengalis, Marwadis, and South Indians. Sons and daughters of the North Indians and those of their family and friends will have hardly any of these jobs available to them in the future. That will totally impoverish North Indians, except for a few of us to whom they will throw some loaves and fishes. If no action is taken to control the productive assets in our own North Indian states from passing into the hands of Modi and his cronies, our standard of living will probably become a quarter that of the other states in about a decade. North Indians graduating from IITs and IIMs, that is, Indian Institutes of Technology and Indian Institutes of Management, or other top engineering and business schools, will no longer receive employment with them. Almost all the employment will go to IITs and IIMs in the states allied with the Germans, as well as graduates from their other second and third tier engineering and management schools. Only a tiny few top North Indian graduates from the IITs and IIMs will get employment in the privatized PSUs and railways to take advantage of their brilliant brains. However, as soon as suitable Gujarati, Rajput, Bengali, Bania, or South Indian replacement can be found for them, they will be let go of their jobs. That is the main objective of Modi government's NMP plan. Chidambaram is absolutely right. Modi government's motives in all its actions are suspect. Every action of the Modi government related to government's finances or the nation's economy is mala fide. He has stated in the past, I am all about business. By that he means taking control of the entire nation's business and putting it under the total control of his cronies, Ambanis, Adanis, and the Tatas, and give control of the rest to the Rajasthani Marwadis, the South Indians, Bengalis, and Baniyas. North Indians should wake up to the Modi government schemes. They are all designed to deprive them of employment opportunities and effectively make them slaves of his cronies forever. But that is not the end of Modi government's mala fide intentions. They want to squeeze all North Indians of as much of their disposable income as possible and selling to them the basic necessities of life such as food, fuel, electricity, building materials, consumer goods, insurance, and other products and services at the highest possible price. That is best illustrated by how Adani is manipulating the coal industry, as explained by Ghanshyam Kaushik in his video. Kaushik asks the question, is Adani's hand behind the coal shortage? That he explains. Out of India's total 135 power plants, 70% are coal fired. Coal India Limited manages production of coal in India. But because of different procedures in different countries, central and state governments don't import coal themselves but use private agents and give them about 7 paisa, which is 0.07 rupees per kilogram commission. In India, coal is transported short distances to nearby power plants in trucks, but by freight train for longer distances. However, imported coal comes via sea, and Adani has built the biggest coal handling terminal in India at the Mundra port in Gujarat. Besides handling most of the imported coal, Adani also transports some of the domestically produced coal from eastern ports to his Mundra port, as transportation costs are lower for long distance destinations than railways with less logistical problems. All this coal comes through Adani's Mundra port. Due to loading, unloading, washing of coal, and theft, there is a wastage of 1 to 1.5%, which is allowed. However, shortage of a maximum of 4% is permitted. Now, 4% of shortage is excessive, or wastage is excessive, whereas 1 to 1.5% is normal. When Adani learned about this, he built the world's biggest coal terminal in Mundra and started removing 4% of the coal. Because this coal then cost him nothing, he could sell his coal at lower prices than the private agents. As a result, the private agents' business began to deteriorate, with Adani becoming the beneficiary of that business. The profitability to Adani can be explained with a simplified example. At present, the price of coal is around 8,775 per ton, which is equal to 1,000 kilograms. For ease of calculation, let's assume it is rupees 10,000 per ton. The private agent gets a commission of rupees 0.7% 7 per kilogram, or rupees 70 per ton. Assume now normal wastage of 1%. Since maximum wastage of 4% is accepted, Adani removes 3% of the coal and assume he incurs normal 1% wastage. The coal he supplied to the power plant now cost him only 9,700 because the 300 was the coal he removed and stole and kept back, which cost him nothing. So the coal he supplied to the power plant cost him only 9,700, for which he received an agent's commission of 70 rupees. Thus, he would realize a total profit of $370 on 1 ton of coal because of the $300 of coal he stole and the 70 rupees per ton commission. Whereas the private agent realized only rupees 70 per ton. Adani would be willing to offer a concessional price of rupees 9,800 per ton to the power plant compared to the 10,000 per ton offered by the private agent, and would still realize a profit of rupees 170 per ton as compared to the private agent's rupees 70 per ton. State power plants also delay payments to private agents by 1 to 2 months because of state finances. Therefore, sometimes agents may hold back shipments of coal and ask for clearance of balances due before they would ship more product. That definitely irks the state utilities. Because of being in Modi's good graces and his Modi's control of banks, Adani gets unlimited concessional rate loans from the banks. As a result, initially, Adani was able to provide 6 month credit to state power plants to pay their bills. The obvious outcome was that the state started buying coal almost exclusively from Adani and private agents began exiting the business. After many agents exited, Adani then raised the commission rate. Commission state power plants were required to pay from rupees 0. 0.7 per kilogram to rupees 0.15 per kilogram and later to 0.23 per kilogram, thus making a killing. All these costs raise the cost of generating electricity for the power plants, which is passed on to the consumers, therefore ultimately comes out of the pockets of even the poorest consumers. That's how Modi and his cronies, Ambani, Adani, and others are engaged in sucking the lifeblood, the portion of their poverty level income they have to pay for these necessities, out of the citizens of North Indian states after trying to grab theirs and the nation's assets through privatization of PSUs and the railways. Kaushik further elaborates on Adani's likely modus operandi. Adani will publicize the shortage of coal for power generation, and Coal India Limited will have to answer for it in Parliament. Coal India Limited will be criticized for inefficiencies and incompetence, and there will be a clamor for privatizing it. The states governments are interested only in a reliable supply of coal for their power plants at stable rates. Because of the coal shortage, Modi government will likely float a tender for the supply of coal. But only Adani will be eligible to bid as he has the largest coal terminal which can handle the required volumes for imports or shipments from domestic sources in the east. Adani has already built the capacity by purchasing nearby railways for smooth transportation and delivery of coal to the utilities. The present coal shortage has been artificially created. It's hard to miss that because Pramod Agarwal, a Bania, who are some of Modi's staunchest allies, he is the director of Coal India Limited. All this has been well planned. Evidence is provided by the Modi government passing three farm bills in 2020. Years before the farm bills were passed, Adani had already started building warehouses to store food grains, which were already being utilized by the Food Corporation of India, or FCI, with the aim of FCI eventually going defunct and Adani taking over the business. Farmers in North India have been agitating for repeal of the three farm bills, which they can clearly see as designed to take away control of the agricultural sector from the state governments and concentrate it in the hands of private firms headed by cronies of Narendra Modi, Mukesh Ambani, and Gautam Adani. The purpose is to take over the work of the National Grain Procurement Agency, the FCI, and give it to them so that they can squeeze the farmers by setting procurement prices lower, rejecting their agricultural output at will for being substandard, and by delaying payments. The farmers will then incur debts and will be forced to sell their land to them to pay off their debt, which will be written into the procurement contracts. Ambani and Adani can then consolidate the land in their hands and become the biggest landlords of the best agricultural land in India. The farmers in the northern states will become landless laborers. There is an already existing marketing and grain procurement structure through agents or middlemen known as artiyas. Adani and Ambani's modus operandi to remove the middleman is the same as is being used in taking over the coal industry. They will pay the farmers higher prices initially and will make a prompt payment so that they would begin selling directly to them rather than through the middlemen. And the middlemen have been put out of after the middlemen have been put out of business, then Adani and Ambani will use the tactics already described to destroy the farmers and turn them into landless laborers. The farmers of North India can see through Modi and Adani's scheme. That's why they're agitating to have the three farm bills repealed. The agitation is now a year old and is still going strong. In fact, about a week ago during protests at Lakhimpur Kheri in Uttar Pradesh state, four farmers were deliberately plowed down by an SUV driven by a government minister's son, killing four protesting Sikh farmers. My purpose in this video is to alert all North Indian citizens about Modi's NMP plan to take over control of the nation's public assets and deprive them of jobs and livelihoods. All North Indian engineers, business school graduates, accountants, and lawyers, beware. You and your children will not have any jobs, as all the jobs will be given to Gujaratis, Rajputs, Bengalis, Baniyas, South Indians, even to those of them graduating from second and third tier engineering, business, commerce, and law colleges. Here is the evidence. How many of you are employed in Ambani, Adani, Tata, Marwadi, or South Indian enterprises? Not many compared to their own people. Remember the migrant crisis of 2020 due to COVID 19? Not only will North Indians be deprived of professional jobs, even the lower level and labor jobs will go mainly to them. Millions of North Indians will be eased out of their jobs and gradually replaced by their people, eventually turning more of us into migrant workers in their states. Farmers see the handwriting on the wall with the farm bills. They know that they will be turned into landless laborers. Do you, non farmer North Indians, see the handwriting on the wall with what Modi, Adani, and Ambani are planning by creating coal shortages with the NMP scheme and privatization of PSUs, railways, and other government enterprises? They want to deprive you of your jobs and kill opportunities for employment for your children. Do not allow Modi and his allies to do this to you. The purpose of creating the public sector was to balance regional development. But we see that Modi's home state of Gujarat and others allied with the Germans have already cornered most manufacturing. Most of even PSUs are located in their states. However, we still have employment available in PSUs. But with their moves in coal, energy, farming, and privatization of PSUs, they will deprive us of all those opportunities. It's time for all of us to join the farmers against the Modi government to prevent it from looting all assets of the country. If we don't take action now, our standard of living will be reduced to a quarter of the standard of living of the other states within a decade. Remember, all these assets have been created with ours and the entire nation's money. They control the banks, whereas our deposits are being lent to Modi cronies at concessional rates to take risks with. They don't hesitate to take risks with our money on their business gambles. That's why the amount of non performing assets, meaning bad loans, is so high. Ultimately, the banks will be bailed out by taxing us further. And now they are planning to steal the assets in PSUs and railways created with our money from right under our noses. North Indians should have no doubt that Modi and all others allied with the Germans are engaged in controlling all the country's finances and the economy so that they can reduce us to virtual slavery, as the status of migrant laborers show. Have we seen this script before? Yes, we have. In America, building around 1970, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett were put in charge by the German masqueraders, who were Americans of German descent, to start working to control America and its economy. Their modus operandi was to use threats delivered electronically to force people to do what they wanted, including resigning from their jobs or promote their people. Those who refused were murdered. They first murdered President John F. Kennedy to demonstrate their long reach to the rest of Americans. Most obeyed. Within a couple of decades, they had taken over most industries and had their men in the highest positions. Now, Rajputs, Gujaratis, and their allies have been employing the same tactic in India. They have placed their own men in key positions in government ministries and even PSUs and banks. Others are intimidated with threats to toe the line. Those who refused are murdered, or the examples of some judges recently being murdered show. That's why they get bank loans and other financings to take risks that would not be otherwise allowed. Then the ministries facilitate their activities by passing laws and regulations so that their businesses become monopolies or duopolies that will be able to raise prices and squeeze everything they can from North Indian consumers. This is a call to action for North Indians. Here are some actions we should take right away. Concerning the National Monetization Plan, we need our North Indian politicians on board to raise a stink about control of assets by a few people from a handful of states. Make equity, discrimination, monopolies, etc. the issues, and agitate to force the government to lease assets through consortiums or joint ventures floated by entrepreneurs from states where the assets are located. They should not be leased to Gujaratis, Rajputs, Marwadis, or South Indian firms exclusively, especially in our states. We need activism from our politicians and constant agitation like the agitation against the farm bills. Only the politicians can do this well, and election time is the best time to convince them to take action. We need to let all our political parties know that we need their support for the sake of welfare of all the people in our states, and their own welfare depends on the welfare of their own people. If their people are richer, they too can become richer. Secondly, the NMP issue is no different from the agitation against the farm bills. Modi government wants to give the entire grain and food procurement, storage and marketing process to Ambani and Adani by taking out of the hands of the state governments, FCI, and farmers in the various states. The purpose of NMP is almost exactly the same. Take control of the assets and put it in the hands of their corporations owned by them so that North Indians can be deprived of more and more jobs. Just as the farm bills are a matter of survival and maintaining the standard of living for the farmer and farming states, retaining control of the assets and the employment they generate is a matter of survival and maintaining a standard of living for the entire populations of our states. Therefore, any person in our state should not be involved in agitating, if need be, to ensure that control of these assets in our states does not go to Modi and his allies, but stays mainly in our hands. Number 3. If the PSUs, railways, and other assets are to be privatized, those located in our states should not be given or leased to Gujaratis, Marwadis, or South Indians. They should be leased to entrepreneurs from our states. Any attempts to give lease assets in our states to them should be vigorously opposed with sustained agitation as needed. Remember, these are assets that are already generating revenue or can generate much greater revenue with little or no additional investment. We just have to manage them more efficiently and make them more productive in terms of generating higher revenues and trim costs. For this purpose, we already have executives and managers from our states working in these enterprises who have the relevant experience in managing them. They should be allowed to bid for these assets by setting up joint ventures. And number 5, our next goal should be to change the central government. The Modi government is dependent on support from UP and Bihar mainly, and it's these very states that are being raped the most economically along with Punjab state. We need to become more politically active and tell our politicians that supporting Modi is going to destroy us. Therefore, if at all possible, they should withdraw their support from his government right now and cause the government to fall or not elect the BJP in the next election. Now, I would like to briefly make some comments on the NMP plan. As stated earlier, I have gone through the interviews by Professor Kaushik Basu and former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram, among some others. Remember, Basu is a Bengali and Chidambaram is a South Indian. Hence, both are Modi allies and a part of the German orchestrated Indian alliance. NMP is being sold as a plan to monetize a variety of government owned assets such as railways, roads, airports, seaports, land around airports, telecom, fiber and towers, petroleum and natural gas pipelines, power generation and power transmission facilities, warehouses, urban real estate, and sports stadia that are being underutilized. Also, the assets will not be sold but will be leased for a period of 25 to 30 years and revert back to the government. The government will be paid upfront about rupees 6 lakh crores or about $80 billion over a 4-year period. The government will use that money to fund more infrastructure projects. Then the government will also derive ongoing revenues as a share of the revenue fees generated by the assets. It is claimed that both of these are many of these are dead or underutilized assets. When utilized fully and more efficiently, the government will realize better revenues. Both Basu and Chidambaram have criticized the plan. Some of Chidambaram's comments are very telling. He asked, will the government roll out the scheme as planned without discussion, or will there be a discussion? There must be wide consultation with trade unions, other stakeholders, among political parties, and full fledged discussion in Parliament, which I'm sure they will never allow. That's why we have to discuss it in the media. Media is not getting into the debate. It's hail to the king and queen. Government should spell out the pros and cons of the scheme. The finance minister just keeps making announcements. Chidambaram knows very well that the government will ram through the scheme through Parliament as it rammed through the 3 farm bills without discussion. So whatever criticism Basu and Chidambaram or anyone else levels at the scheme is irrelevant. That's why they have no hesitation in criticizing it. But being Modi's allies, they are rather happy that the scheme has been put forward so that their allies can loot and corner the nation's productive assets and deprive North Indians the jobs they generate. Basu is of the opinion that the government will not be able to collect the rupees 6 lakh crore or $80 billion it has estimated. He believes the government will collect only half of that because of the state of the economy. He believes that the $80 billion estimate is only a high level estimate based on rules of thumb. Because of his status as an expert, is Basu giving the government of India the idea that it can actually hoodwink the public by letting the successful bidders pay only half the value and make huge profits? I would not discount that idea since he is a Bengali and is a Modi ally. The government will now be able to justify letting Modi's cronies and allies acquire assets for very little. Both Basu and Chidambaram know that the scheme will create monopolies or duopolies. That means higher prices for consumers. Yes, Modi and his cronies will get a license to fleece the North Indian consumers for the next 25 to 30 years. I fully agree with this assessment. Basu makes another valid criticism. He says that the government would have realized more from the sale of the PSUs and other assets rather than leasing them. He also knows that the government is hoodwinking Indians because it knows that by leasing for 25 to 30 years, the assets will be effectively sold to the bidders but at throwaway lease prices. The government is using the trick to counterintelligence to sale of assets to Modi's cronies. Both men feel the impact on jobs is difficult to predict but will likely be negative as the private sector will use more technology and less manpower. Both North Indians should be terrified about the impact, but North Indians should be terrified about the impact on their lives or on their jobs. Once these assets are controlled by Modi's cronies and his other allies, North Indians will lose their jobs wholesale and their children will be deprived of future employment opportunities. Both men agree that the welfare of the poor will suffer if the assets are leased. The private sector will try to maximize profits, charge higher prices, and the poor will suffer. They will also strip the assets of value and skimp on maintenance and will leave them either worthless or or of little value at the end of the lease, perhaps to acquire them for a song at the end of the lease. These issues have not been spelled out in the plan. Basu says that the Scandinavian countries are capitalist countries, but they take the welfare of citizens very seriously. Consider the railways. Chidambaram says Singapore had to take back its rail as its maintenance was shoddy. UK tried to privatize its railways. Railways is a public utility. I'm appalled by the idea that the bulk of the railways will be monetized. Japan, UK, France, Italy, Germany run excellent public infrastructure. So why not India? Chidambaram also criticizes how the scheme is hoodwinking Indians by not spelling out details. For example, the rupees 6 lakh crore to be utilized will be compared with what profit the government is currently realizing from the PSUs. In addition, the government has not considered the initial investment in the PSUs. For example, if the government realizes rupees 6 lakh crores over 4 years as an investment of rupees 200 lakh crores, it is realizing a return of only 0.07% per year. It may be basically leasing the asset for a walk, for a song. In my view, the consumer about the National Monetization Plan scheme is obvious. It is an attempt by Modi to give control over valuable public assets to his cronies for little or no money so that they can corner all the jobs and profits and deprive North Indians of jobs and reduce them to virtual slavery. All of Modi's schemes have been designed to take control of all the country's finances and economy. He has put his own men in charge of key government ministries, banking and financial institutions, and regulatory bodies. All are forced into towing the government's line with intimidation and threats of violence and murder. They have actually murdered some as an example and dire warning to others. How GST scheme was designed to take control of much of state government revenues and put them in the hands of the central government so that it can control the state governments to some extent by delaying payment of their share if they do not toe the central government line. He has set up a slush fund called PM Cares fund to buy legislators and maintain control of the government far into the future. The three farm bills were passed to control the lives and livelihoods of farmers and those involved in marketing and financing the agriculture sector's products. The purpose of the NMP was to take control of much of the nation's assets, control the lives of common people, particularly North Indian states, impoverish them and enrich themselves at their expense. North Indians, beware. India is coming for your jobs and livelihoods. You need to take action now. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the video. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the facility to make the text of my videos available on YouTube. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that facility. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which can also easily copy.